Good afternoon, and welcome to the Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Friends Lecture Series. My name is Barbara Proschel, and I'm president of the Friends of the Institute. Thank you for coming today. We are quite excited to have our guest speaker, Jody Folwell, who is a groundbreaking artist and potter, along with her daughter, Susan Folwell, who's also an accomplished potter. And they will be in conversation with Adriana Gretchen Green and Bruce Bernstein from the Fralin Museum of Art at the University of Virginia. So their talk or discussion will focus on and give context to the exhibition Opawa Omeng, The Art and Legacy of Jody Folwell, which is up for your viewing pleasure in the Cargill Gallery on the main floor, and that is up until January 26th. So before we get started, we need a word from our sponsor. This lecture is presented by the Friends of the Institute with generous support from the Mark and Mary Goff Fitterman Fund. And on the screen, you'll notice some of our upcoming Friends events, our book club on the 15th and 16th, which includes a tour. And mark your calendars for December 12th, where we will have our December lecture, and you'll get to meet Dr. Max Bryant, who is MIA's new curator of decorative arts. An hour beforehand, we have the Friends member tour of the topic of the lecture, and then directly afterwards, we'll have a luncheon where we welcome one and all. Let's see, and then we also in December will have our holiday Buy a Bus campaign. And many of you know that the Friends actually support a busing or transportation grant that we give to schools so that students can come to basically experience the wonder of art. And buses are a little hard to wrap up, but they make wonderful presents. So. Just a quick reminder to please silence your cell phones, and during the Q&A, we will pass around a couple of microphones. And now I'd like to introduce Valeria Piccoli, who will in turn introduce our guest speakers. So Valeria is the Ken and Linda Cutler Chair of the Department of the Arts of the Americas and Latin American curator at MIA. She received her master's degree and PhD in art history at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. And before coming to MIA in 2022, Valeria was the chief curator at the Pinacoteca de Sao Paulo, which is one of the largest museums in South America. So despite being born and raised in Brazil, we're just happy that Valeria decided she could move to the Northern Hemisphere. So please help me in welcoming Valeria Piccoli to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Barbara just forgot to say that not only I moved, but I moved during the winter. I'm still here. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm very pleased to welcome our guests and panelists, Jody Folwell and Susan Folwell from Santa Clara, Pueblo, New Mexico, and Adriana Gretchen Green and Bruce Springs. That was the best one. Bruce Bernstein. I'm sorry. Curator for Southwest Art. To see Jody Folwell's art is to encompass the unexpected. Jody possesses an extraordinary and unique artistic vision that builds on traditional Pueblo pottery techniques while pushing beyond these traditional styles into the realm of groundbreaking art. Throughout her career that spans 5 decades, Jody has consistently reached for new horizons, and in doing so, has revolutionized Pueblo pottery, Native American art, and more broadly, American art. Jody balanced her traditional Pueblo upbringing with studies at the University of New Mexico, majoring in history and political science and graduating with both a BA and MA. In 1974, she turned her focus on creating pottery full-time and moved from traditional Santa Clara blackware and redware to create her modern buff-colored pottery, using new forms, different styles, and striking, fresh colorations that reflected her personal sense of color. She experimented with engraving, incising, carving, cutouts, and painting. At times, her pottery had a political or social issues message, such as women's rights and native rights. She has justly earned her title as the first Impressionist potter, as her work is seen as such due to its uneven lips, its asymmetrically polished approaches, and its combinations of 2D and 3D. As one who embraces modernism, she also remains steeped in tradition. She has won countless awards, starting from her first big win at the Santa Fe Indian Market in 1975. Her legacy has extended to her daughters, Polly Rose and Susan Folwell, as well as her granddaughter, Ka. Susan, who has collaborated on several artworks, is part of the new innovators in Pueblo pottery. She too works in native clay and uses traditional designs, yet she also pushes forward with techniques, clays, and imagery that show provocative, witty, and thoughtful visions. She has had solo and group exhibitions at museums and galleries throughout New Mexico and the East Coast, and has won a Best of Division awards at the Santa Fe Indian Market as well. Joining us today for this conversation are two of the curators of this special exhibition. Adriana Guerci Green, PhD, is the curator of Indigenous Arts of the Americas at the Fraley Museum of Art, where she endeavors to reconnect the art within the collection with their respective communities and to uncover the indigenous histories and experiences these artworks reflect. Her research and numerous publications explored material expressions of sovereignty and treaties. With Native collaborators, she developed Native Artists of North America, the permanent installation of the Native American art at the Newark Museum of Art. Bruce Bernstein, PhD, works throughout the American Southwest. For over 4 decades, he has collaborated with museums, modeling partnerships in research methodologies and curatorial principles and practices. He has published widely on Native art and curated over 100 exhibitions throughout the U.S. He presently serves as Historic Preservation Office for the Pueblo de San Ildefonso and is a senior scholar at the School for Advanced Research in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I also want to acknowledge the presence here of a third curator of this exhibition, the one who began this project here at MIA, Ju Albert Yeo, who is a former associate curator of Native American art here at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. And obviously, you know her for the amazing exhibition she curated here at the museum, including Hearts of Our People, Native Women Artists, and In Our Hands, photography from 1890s to now. So she also has co-edited several publications and written extensively on Native weaving, Native contemporary art, and art theory and practice. So welcome, everybody, and please I'll invite you to take the stage from here. Thank you.
So I'm Adriana, and that's Bruce Springsteen. So I'm going to advance to the title page here a second. And I just want to thank you all for coming out today. I would like to thank Josie Owens and Marnie Zafar and the Friends Lecture Committee for this event. Thank you for your awesome hospitality. And the Friends Lecture Committee, I think I said the full word. Also the Friends of the Institute. I also would like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art that has supported this exhibition and the catalog. and Lorraine R. Hart. We're so delighted for the incredible support also for this exhibition and other Native American programming broadly. I also would like to acknowledge Susan Ratskin, one of the lenders to this exhibition, who is also joining us here today. So thank you so much for really helping making this exhibition possible. The staff at MIA, thank you all for the great collaboration. And I want to say that this is the first collaboration between the Freeland Museum of Art at the University of Virginia, where, as you heard, I'm the curator of Indigenous Arts of the Americas, and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. For us, we're a small university museum, and this is really one of our major collaborations with a big major museum. So we're really thankful for this opportunity, and it's been a wonderful experience so far. So thank you also for the staff at MIA. And thank you primarily to Jody Folwell and Susan Folwell for trusting the curators and us to work on this first traveling museum retrospective of Jody's work and your legacy, represented here also by Susan, among others. So with that said, I will kick it off to Bruce to start us off in this conversation, and we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A.
Welcome, everyone. I guess I'm a man of mixed identities today, which is fine. I've had the extraordinary privilege of working with Jody and her family for many years, almost 40 years at this point. There were two things where I met her originally. We were curating an exhibition in Santa Fe, mostly historic pottery in the museum's collection, about 400 pieces, and we needed some pieces to say, people are still here. People are continuing pottery, but making it different now. And so one of those pieces that Jody, we purchased or acquired for the museum was Ruber Stampede, which is on view. We'll leave that stand as that for now. And the other thing she did was she directed a film about potters in the late 80s, 1989, 1990. And we went to potters' houses and talked to people. They showed us what they were doing. It was an extraordinary opportunity to walk with her and see that world. I had met Jody probably a little bit earlier than that. She is from a small village in northern New Mexico, about 30 minutes north of Santa Fe. It's probably about 2,500 people now, something along those lines.
It's running more cores, closer to 4.
Oh my gosh, I lost count. It's 4,000 people now.
Yep.
And it's a very traditional place. It's a very modern place. The small world in which Jody grew up in was the last world of truly people needing to go to the river to get their water and bring it back home in pots, not having utility services in people's homes and so forth. And she grew up in that pre-World War II world. And of course, the world of Santa Clara was, like most of northern New Mexico, shattered and changed for good and bad by the Manhattan Project, today known as the Los Alamos National Laboratories, which continues to impact the northern country. One of the things where I first saw Jody was a pot she produced for the 1985 Indian market, 1984 Indian market. And that green pot is also on view this green pot is also on view. And I have to say, I had not seen it in a long, long time. I thought it was like the size of a beach ball. But it's smaller than that, and it's the size of a beach ball because this singular pot is so important. Jody grew up in a world that made basically polished red and polished blackware pottery, and sometimes micaceous pottery. And that making of red and black pottery was largely dictated by the collecting or the outside world. Although the people of the community had used that pottery to fortify themselves, empower themselves, and keep themselves native in the front of colonialism by the Spanish and then American populations. But Jody came along and produced this pot, a green pot. And it's also got incised cavalry guys on it, not incised by her, but by another person, and not a person from Santa Clara. So that day, as they were judging the best pot, best of show in the 1984 Indian market, there were two pots left on the table, and one was a black pot, as people expected Santa Clara to be, and one was this green pot. One group, and literally the table split in two, and one group said, I can't sell a green pot. The other half of the crowd said, I don't want to see another black pot. They didn't mean that disparagingly, but the world was so filled with black pottery that here is a fresh statement. So people complained about it being green, people celebrated about being green, but the most important thing that happened was the next year there was green pots all over Indian market. And Jody is that revolutionary. Jody is that revolutionary. She is really that person who has recreated Santa Clara and other styles of Pueblo pottery in the last over the last 50 years, which is also very hard to believe. I'd like to introduce you, Jody Folwell, and ask Jody to talk a little bit about that green pot and how that came about.
Thank you for having me here today. It's a great pleasure. And like to speak about the green piece. I wanted to change my style of working with clay. And I just thought to myself, what do I do? How do I change things for myself? Not so much for anybody else. I decided at that point I was going to take that tiny little step away from the black and red. But I did not realize that it was going to change what everyone saw about what pottery was all about. And it wasn't so much that I was bent on changing, it was so much a bent on what do I do to make things better for myself and to make a little difference in the world. So I did the green piece, and I fired the piece. No, but before I fired the piece, and I polished the pot, and it's coiled. And I polished it green, and the green came from one of the lake beds in northern part of New Mexico. And the red is a Santa Clara slip that I use for the lightning on the background of the carved pieces. And I had a friend by the name of Bob Houses, and Bob came by and he was talking to me about the designs that he was doing. And I said, why don't we work together on this piece? And he said, oh, they'll be excited. So I said, market's coming up and it's only a couple of days away. And he said, oh, I can do that overnight. I didn't believe him. And there was the piece for market, which was done, which was carved overnight. And he wanted to talk about how the world was changing so fast. Art world was changing for Indian people, and it was for a free fall. So you can see the horses, you can see the people that were falling. And where were we all going? Had no idea. But in the end, this piece knew exactly where it was going.
And am I correct in saying that for when this particular piece was entered for judging at the Santa Fe Indian Market, there was no category. So you have to submit your pieces in particular categories. And the judges initially, even without the conversation of do we want a black pot or a green pot for the winner, there is no category for this. What do we do with it? So that was also another revolutionary thing that happened, that there was no category basically for contemporary. Am I right?
That's correct. Absolutely.
So that was another huge breakthrough. And now there's, I don't know, there's a breakdown of 20 categories for contemporary now, which is pretty amazing.
And should I also add, I don't know if you said it, that in the end, it also won,
Yes.
right? It won Best of Show.
Yes.
It won Best of Show, which is the top category.
So one of the things about pottery, one of the things we're talking about is this idea of tradition. Tradition is a very complicated word. The only reason we still have tradition is because it keeps changing. But the marketplace had not allowed change in pottery and had really stagnated it in order that people could collect certain types of pottery. But tradition pottery, traditional pottery, I'm just wondering if you would just tell people a little bit how you learned to make pottery, about your family, your great-grandmother and grandmother and mother.
My great grandmother was making pots, not for a living.
Oh, just like that.
Okay, my great grandmother, her name was Jiahong, Mother Corn, was making pottery not for a living, but to be able to store her corn, the seeds, the whatever she needed to store in those large jars. So what she would do is, and they would break constantly, and then we would also use some of the pots to go down to the creek, which was about a quarter of a mile away from the Pueblo, and would get water in the jars that she made. And it was a very important time for me because we were at that point not so much saying this is difficult. We did it because that's what life is about. We went out to dig the clay, to process the clay, and you're looking at children that are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. That's doing all of the slave work. But we didn't think about it in those terms. We just did it because maybe we had to. I'm not quite sure at this point in time. But, and to pick the cow manure and the wood that was required in firing the pots. And I grew in this kind of environment. I grew up in this environment, which was so incredible because once we finished with our basic work, we were allowed to go out and play. And it was very important for us to be able to see the rest of the village. And it was a very special place during that period of time, during the 40s and early 50s, because life was safe. We were allowed to go and do whatever we wanted to do. Late in the evenings, the elderly people would sit in front of the kiva. The kiva is the religious building where everybody goes to go pray, to where they hold their dances. And they would build a bonfire in front of the kiva. The ladies would sit there in front of the fire. They'd be talking about their pottery, what kind of pottery they made, or if their pots had broken during the firing. Because sometimes when I'm making a large piece, especially for the Obama installation, I had to make 4 large pieces just so that I'm assured of the fact that one's going to come out in the firing. And it was a time when it was an education at such an early age for working in clay and making pottery, but everything was traditional. Everything was made to produce for use. And during the 40s also, they had large tourist buses coming in, and the train that came by close to Santa Clara, Pueblo, and people would get out, come in, and everybody would scurry out and take out their little pots and put them out in their blankets, and they would sell them to the tourists that were coming in. So that was something that I would keep in my mind always, because it was the first time I had seen white people. And that was the first time I had any interaction with somebody besides somebody from the Pueblo. And it made a great deal of impression to me. And I wanted to go out and see the world. I wanted to make a difference in terms of what I saw and what I was going to do. So all I can say at that point is that particular period of time in my life was very important because I was able to see something different than what was presented to the world and to us as a community. But as you can see, the world has changed. It is so incredible. When I see Susan's work, I go, my God, what is going on inside of her head? I wish I could walk in there and find out what's happening in there. Or my granddaughter, Ta, or my great grandson, Tonka. And it's just so amazing that I can see that happening now. Or some of the other artists, or some of the other potters that are coming up with different styles, with different ideas. And it's so exciting to see this. And to know that I was just maybe a smidgen a part of it. And it's exciting to know that maybe I played a small part in it.
You want to explain that part?
Dying to know.
I really enjoy doing social commentary. I love watching movies. I'll watch movies while I make pottery, and it's great because it gives me a time frame. So it's like, okay, I have 2 hours and 10 minutes to get this far, right? Then I can take a break and feed the dogs or wash dishes or whatever, and then I can put on another movie and start another time frame of something. And then you've also got company. It's like, you're just listening to a story, not necessarily watching it. Anyway, I was thrilled. So I still remember standing in line in 1977 to see Star Wars, right? I mean, it was mind blowing. Standing in outside a line in Santa Fe at the Lensic Theater down off the plaza. And I turned around and there's every other Indian kid I knew from the 8 northern Pueblos that was right behind me, right in line. So you know that it just impacted everybody. I'm sure it's almost like when Kennedy got shot. It's like, I know where I was when Star Wars came out. And of course, decades went by, and all of a sudden, I heard about Manny Wheeler's project on the Navajo Nation with George Lucas to dub Star Wars in Navajo to help revitalize the language. And I just thought that was the most brilliant thing I had ever heard about since Harry Potter. So oddly enough, I mean, it was just a blossom of an idea. And all of this happened very quickly. It's a fairly large size piece. Well, you'll see it in the gallery, but it's about this high. And the concept just came together very quickly, but I wanted to do it where you could see just Star Wars interacting with the Native community. And as you know, Princess Leia's buns were influenced by Hopi maidens. So there's a little bit of Edward Curtis up on top, one of his photographs of the Hopi natives, and then one of the land cruisers, which is inside the lid, but there's a Navajo man in the land cruiser, and you can see his braids flying through the air. And then, of course, Manny Wheeler helped me translate into Navajo, what is it? In a galaxy far, far away. And that's Navajo around the rim. And if you turn the pot over, I kind of thought the shape was a little wonky in the way that, and things I think kind of work out for a reason. You always have a conversation with clay. You can make notes, you can sketch as much as you want, but there always has to be a give and take with the clay. And you have to figure out what that is and why. That's up to you to dissect, I think, if that's the right word. But the big open rim just really made for a nice scene that comes back down around. It's a very slender neck. And then you turn the pot over and it's the entire Death Star at the bottom of the pot. And the best part about that is the base is really wide. So when you turn it over, it's kind of a twofold. Not only are you staring at the entire Death Star, but it kind of, speaking of Los Alamos, it kind of looks like a mushroom cloud, like a nuclear explosion. So, I really enjoyed having it with me because I would play with it. One day it'd be upside down all day, and then the next day I'd turn it around and enjoy it from the top. But I love those kinds of inspirations, and that also bleeds into social commentary. And I think there's a lot of things, there's a lot of really difficult subjects that you can address with humor or lightheartedness. Um, I've done a number of pieces on gun control, and school shootings and I shouldn't say, I don't want to offend anybody, and it's not meant to offend in that regard, but if you can add some humor or some lightheartedness, you don't have to always approach it from the awful subject that it is. People will want to have a conversation with you about it, and opens up dialogue about those situations. So this is not that, it's just wonderful Star Wars, but this is the style of my work that works for me to make conversation.
You got it now? Can you repeat all that?
That's incredible.
Okay. Do you want to talk about Kyle's work a little bit?
Sure. This is my great granddaughter's or my granddaughter's work. And she had made the piece and then she started breaking it apart. And she has beetles in the center. And she started doing graffiti on the inside. And I sat there and I thought, what in the world is she doing? Why is she doing that? That is so strange. Yes, I break my pots, but then she's doing graffiti on the inside. But that's that particular age. And I had to just really rethink things over when I was looking at it. But it's such an incredible piece because it's just so far removed from what I think my contemporary work is. And I say to myself, thank God that there's something farther beyond what I think is contemporary.
In a galaxy far, far away.
Yes, yes, absolutely. On the Navajo reservation.
Not anybody else. Well, it's sweet justice that you wonder how far pottery has gone, just between in your own family, your granddaughter and your daughter, and just how they've taken influences from their own time and their own lives. That's what people wondered about you as well. There's no doubt about that, and that your social commentary. Some of my favorite pieces of your social commentary is at Santa Clara. Water is scarce in New Mexico. You're not supposed to fence your yard with any type of wooden fence. You're not supposed to have grass and no more than 2 dogs. So Jody has a fenced yard with beautiful grass and beautiful fruit trees. And she used to have about 13 or so dogs. So the dogs, though, were rescues. She was the original rescue crew in Espanola, which is a town next to Pueblo. And she needed to feed and care for those dogs. Every dog came in and needed some veterinary attention. So she made dog pots to pay for their expenses. So they really were able to do that. You want to say something about
Yes.
dog pots? I can tell.
So any of the dog pots that you see, especially with the dog on the lid, those pots, and the sales went directly, specifically this, and they're cooking pots. People will cook their beans or their soup in those pots in an oven, so or a fireplace, should I say, or an outdoor oven. And at one point, I had 50 dogs that I had rescued for that spring and summer. And I needed to find food. I needed to find homes for them. So I started begging my collectors, and they came forward and they picked up dogs. They flew them from here to China. And it was really exciting to see that people had cared enough and that I was getting enough money to make sure that they were spayed and neutered. And so those are so-called the dog pots because they had served a purpose.
Go ahead. You want to talk about that?
Oh, yes, this was originally a dog pot, and it was for the it was for the show for the women in the arts, and it was a plain piece with a dog lid on it. And it didn't sell at the Women in the Arts show. So I decided to start looking at it, and the whole problem with Reagan and the Middle East came up. And being somewhat educated in politics, I started looking at the situation, and I have my positive and negative feelings about all of that. But I thought I needed to do something with it. I decided to put um, Reagan, oh no, not Reagan, but Bush, as a sheriff right into the desert looking for Osama bin Laden. And Osama bin Laden is lying there in the grass with his hands posed in a prayer. And I thought, why am I doing that? You know, I erased that about 3 times, but then I finally left it alone where I left him in a pose praying. So that gave me a sense of saying, maybe there is a way out for this person. And this man is still right in the desert looking for him. It took him and others how long to find him? And I thought that this was a really incredible piece because it was originally a dog pot that saved particular animals. And here it was. How much did we save?
Well, one of the things about Pueblo pottery is it's always been autobiographical. And I know that sometimes people get confused. They think it's all craft and all just replicated one after another. But one of the things about Jody and Susan's work and the work that they've both inspired is really that people have put themselves onto these jars and bowls and plates, and taught us a lot about their own communities and the way that they have stayed true to themselves as Pueblo people. But at the same time, everybody has cars and likes the same thing, standing in line at Star Wars and traveling the world. And Jody in particular has traveled the world. Well, this is a good one to start on. I was going to go with, but why don't you start? So one of the things that Jody likes to tell us about is her own family, in particular her mother and father, which this pot has something to do with. Oh, it's labeled wrong, but don't remember that.
This particular piece is fairly tall, and it's about, I would guess, 14 to 16 inches high. And my father went through heart surgery, and during surgery, he ended up having a stroke, and he wasn't expected to live. So I decided I needed to make an urn for him. And at the bottom, it says Gia, Da, meaning father, mother, Okwinge. Okwinge is a place where we go when we die, and it's a place where we come back again. And I decided to put all of the fish in there for my father because we would go fishing all the time. And I keep telling this story because this is so important to me. My father would load us up into the Model T truck early in the morning before he went to work up in Los Alamos. He was a carpenter, he was a plumber, a welder. And we would pick up, or we would fish and probably get maybe 20, 30 fish. And that would be our breakfast, our lunch, our dinner, plus food for everybody else that my mother thought needed food for the day. So this was also a whole idea of what do you do in a community that gives? And the fish is a whole idea of giving back, because that's what I think about when I see the fish on my pots, my father, my mother, and how they gave to a community. And the frog at the top represents my mother because my sister had taken to her an opera. And she sat there and she was probably in her mid-80s. And the people were singing there. And she said, she came back and she said, Judy, they look like frogs singing. And so I decided, and then she started making frogs that were singing. So I decided to put a frog on top of this urn that I made for them.
You're also, like many artists, very curious about the world around you, and you've been influenced by different cultures where you've traveled. This is another fish pot. Do you want to comment on that particular pot?
This is an exciting piece because I go fishing up to Canada and I go fishing for salmon. And it reminds me again of my father. But I started with the trout at the bottom because I was watching a PBS while I was working on pottery. And they were talking about the fact that trout was basically the mother of salmon and a lot of other fish, different types of fish. And so I decided to bring the fish and put the fish at the bottom. And there's fish inside swirling around, trying to come up to the top. This particular pot was made for a purpose, not for the fish pot, but my cats had broken a Doug Miles pot that was very hardcore, a female with guns in her hands. And so I said to my daughter, the cats broke this incredible piece, which was probably about 15, 16 inches high. And so she said, why don't you just make another pot and then we'll take it to Doug and then he can make another one for you. So I said, okay. And I decided to make 3 of these pots to make sure that one of them came out. And one morning I woke up after coming back from fishing in Canada. I thought, you know what? I think this needs to be a fish pot. So that's how this became a fish pot instead of Doug Miles' pot.
And the first time she went fishing in Canada, she won both the women's derby and the men's derby.
Yeah, it was real interesting because we got on a flight with all of this men. And we had a small female fishing group, and there was probably about 8 of us that were flying out with them. And they're all talking about their fishing experiences and all the wonderful places that they've been fishing. But they come to this particular place every year. So when we got back on the plane and I won the Derby for the largest salmon caught for that season, or for that run that week. And we fished probably 10 to 12 hours a day. So that was really exciting. But when we got back to the airport, all of the guys are sitting there looking at me like this. And then they were pointing. And when you're in Canada, Indians aren't really looked on very well, so that everyone is kind of put aside. And then when you're looking at this old Indian woman who had just caught the largest fish for that particular period of time, they were just absolutely out of their mind.
And I had asked Mom, I said, so congratulations, where's the fish? And she said, oh, it's being stuffed. And I was like, you can stuff a fish? You can, and it's over her doorway into the main entrance, and it is.
That's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge. It's huge. It took me something like 3 hours to pull it out of the ocean. And by the time I did, I had bruises on my belly, on my chest, because I was trying to hold my rod and it kept running out back into the ocean. I would pull it back in, then it went under the boat, and I was still trying to pull it out. So that's basically what that's about.
So I sort of touched a little bit that your work is so often about social justice. And I'm just wondering if you would just say a few words about the patriarchal hierarchy in Santa Clara a little bit, and being the largest landowner and how that riles all the men still.
I think that over a period of time, I just found that I was just really a little annoyed with some of the governors, the council members. They were all men, and the owners were mostly men also. And I thought, okay, I would like to do something about it, but I didn't really do anything about it until I started making pottery, and I needed some horse and cow manure. So then I started looking around, and my neighbor, who was getting elderly, and he decided that he was going to sell his place. I decided to buy the place. And I was working with Lee Coyne at Gallery 10, so I was able to purchase the place.
And it was how many acres?
84 acres. And in the meantime, my parents, I was taking care of my parents, and especially my father. He was bedridden most of the time, so they decided they needed some funds. So I purchased 140 acres from them, which was part of the cattle ranch. I started a cattle ranch because I needed cow manure to fire my pottery with. So that's how that started, with ranching and farming for me. And in the meantime, all the men are so angry. They're still very angry. But at this point, what they're doing is they're borrowing my land because I don't have cattle any longer. I have about 20 to 30 acres of alfalfa that I grow and that I run myself. And so at sometimes when they need alfalfa or bales for their cattle, they'll come over to see if I have extra, and I just give it to them. Don't sell it to them, but just give it to them. So they're appreciative, but they're also at the same time standing with the other men pointing fingers. So it becomes a real interesting situation to be in. And being in a kind of a socialistic community, you maintain your distance, you maintain a certain kind of feeling of, okay, I belong here, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you don't overexpose yourself. But since I did overexpose myself with the land and the grass and the fence, it's becoming a little bit more common for them to acknowledge me now.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I know it's a complicated piece. I just wanted people to hear a little bit more about Santa Clara, that it is at times romantic, but it's also very real, with very real
Yes.
social issues that are always there. I was wondering if you might talk a little bit. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah.
Just very quickly, Mom, talking about cow manure and the importance and the purpose of it is during the firing process, while the pot's still very hot and you pull it out of the fire, the pores of the pot open up. And then you place the cow manure, you can see, so that's how you get the black inside. Is a cow patty. There's probably some manure that's placed inside the pot, and the pot's still so hot, it probably catches on fire, right? So to create the smoke. And then you can see that there's a patty put on top, and then you can still see darker spots around it where the smoke would swirl. And it's kind of fun when you sit around a table with Pueblo potters from different Pueblos, and everybody, eventually, there's always the great debate about what's better, cow manure, horse manure, or sheep manure? And it's always around a table. I don't know why. But anyway, I just wanted to point out an example of using the manure.
The belted area on the lip of the pot came out directly from my seeing a Japanese bamboo show in Denver at the Denver Art Museum. And it took me about 3 years to process what I wanted to do in terms of maybe introducing Japanese work into my work. And I just decided at that point that I wanted to have the Japanese volcanic pots where it's black, where the volcano is shooting out with the red slip coming down. And then just a little bit of the black speckling that went on the pot. Some of them have more speckling, but what you do is you start a fire, you put your pots into a metal container, you put your cedar or pine wood around, and you fire your pot, and you leave a little hole on the side of the metal container, and you look in, and the pot is glowing. It's red hot. And so you count just long enough to know that it's cool enough. And you remove all the wood away from the container and it's starting to cool off and you count again to maybe about 15 seconds. And you take the pot out and you have your cow patty on fire. You drop one inside so it turns black. And then you place your cow patty on top so that, and you never know what you're going to get. It's a real big surprise. So I decided to call them the Japanese volcanic pieces because this is what came out of the bamboo show that I saw.
So
And,
oh,
okay.
we're gonna take some questions in just a moment. I just wanted people to hear again from you that this wasn't, you saw the show, you made the pot. But how many years did you experiment so you could come up with this particular piece?
This one probably came out 3 years later. It took me that long to just learn how to process and how to make it work. And thinking about still remaining within the traditional realm. And so some of my pieces are still traditional. And then all of a sudden I decided one day, okay, up top of a volcano is very rough and it's torn apart. So I decided to melt the top of the pot. So that's how those particular pieces came about, was when I had flipped the pot over when it was dry, melted the top so that you had that actual volcanic look coming out. There is one particular piece that you had seen just prior to this piece with the, no,
Which one?
Oh, I know.
Well, tell me.
it's with the horses.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, the prehistoric, yeah, you just passed it.
Sorry.
This is how we curated the show, by the way. Exactly like this.
This one here.
There.
This one is really incredible because I did the Japanese volcanic pot at the top, but I had seen some prehistoric drawings and I had been to a cave in Madrid, New Mexico, and they had, just interesting figures that they had in there. And then I started looking at some of the prehistoric drawings out of France. And this is what I decided to do at that point. I decided to have the very primitive look at the top where everything was falling in. And when you walk into a cave, what do you see? You see smoke, you see things crackling and falling apart, and the walls of the cave is uneven and discolored. And I decided to put in my prehistoric horses in there. But it's really nice because right in the center, you can see where the water started dripping and running in 2 areas, and it's coming down in a V. And I thought that was wonderful. And sometimes what I do is, if I don't like a piece, I'll slightly break it and crack it so that I melt that area and you have a complete different looking piece of work at that point.
Yeah, no, I'll just say the experimentation, and if you haven't seen the exhibition yet, of course, please go there and you'll see this incredible range of experimentation, which is what we're talking about here. And I think I'm in the position of having to sort of call time here. So if there are any questions, here we go.
There's some microphones will be handed to you.
Yeah, they'll be arriving. There's a question there. Here she's coming with I can't even see.
I want to ask you about your fish pot. It looks like those fish go all the way down to the bottom on the inside. And I am so curious how you did that.
It was very difficult to do that.
That's what another potter told me. That would be very difficult.
Yes, because I had my hand upside down and a mirror trying to get all the fish painted on the inside as they were swirling up.
And the pot is more narrow, so did your brush have to be pretty short? To do that?
Yes, I had to cut the brush, 2 of them, maybe 3 of them, because of the mere fact that it was much more narrow at the bottom. Yeah.
Well, it is just so amazing. And
Thank you.
I just, oh, it's just overwhelming.
Okay, we have a question up here. Okay.
I wanted to ask about the other fish pot. Did you sculpt that? The one that was intended as an urn for your mother and your
Yes.
father?
It belongs to the Montclair Museum.
Yes.
Yes.
But did you start with a surface that was solid and then extract from it?
The whole thing was coil built, okay?
Yes.
And what I do is I pack the pot for maybe 2 days. I put it in a plastic container and I pack it to get the air bubbles out. You need to make sure that all of the air bubbles out, especially when you're doing relief work, because otherwise they'll just pop right straight out. And I slowly put on the fish as I'm packing the pot. And then I start working on them to kind of make them look more like a fish and as to how I want to see them.
And have you painted and sculpted fish so long that you automatically know what it looks like? Because those are
No,
the most
No,
realistic fish
not
I've
all
ever
the
seen.
time, no.
Is it all right if we go back to the red pot with the buffaloes? This is also a form of relief. I remember Mom making this when I was maybe, I don't know, somewhere between 7 and 10 years old, and it was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, because she's basically just using a palette knife, a painting palette knife, and her fingers.
This was also judged at Indian Market in 1975, which really isn't all that long ago, but was brought in. Well, it's not really an Indian pot. We really don't have a place for it. And they reluctantly allowed it to be entered that year, and it won first place for best pottery in Indian Market that year.
I saw a piece that I did shortly after this, and it's about the same size. It's about 8 inches high, and I had wolves running, chasing the buffaloes. And I saw it at the Charles King Gallery this past summer. I walked by it and I thought, wow. And it's hard for me to comprehend that that was what I did. I wanted that piece so bad, so I went to Charles and I said, Charles, can I buy that pot from you? And he said, no, what I want you to do is I want you to take it home and you can make me a leaf pot. I said, okay. I ran home with my buffalo pot and it's sitting there and I stare at it every single day because it's memories of a time. It's like turning a page for me of who I was and what I am and what was happening during that period of time, chasing the kids, screaming at them, or yeah, because those are just memories that you have. It's just like if you have a booklet that you're writing about life in general for yourself. For me, it's pottery. Because when I look at a pot, it's certain things that were happening during that period of time, like when my father had the stroke and I was preparing for him to pass away. And when he passed away, did he go in an urn? No. He's buried in my backyard and it's against against every bit of breath that any tribal member could have against having anyone buried away from the tribal cemetery. What I did was I made sure that when they brought his body in, we put him and carried him to my house, and we had dug the hole that night and we had buried him in my yard. We were taken to council, we were reprimanded, And they're so traditional, they're so superstitious that they would not remove the body. But it remained there, and it still remains there. And my mother, she had passed away, and she had Parkinson's, and took care of her for quite some time. And her ashes were probably divided, but I got most of it, and I put it into one of her cooking pots and buried it right next to my dad. So both of them are buried there. My father liked to go fishing, so I bought a totem pole, which Susan helped me to purchase. And so that is their marker. Marker is about 16 feet high up in the air. And that's where my parents are, in my backyard, against the wishes of everybody in the tribe.
One last question.
Sure, I have a question. I was wondering if either of you have like new techniques or new to you techniques or forms that aren't captured in the exhibit that you're excited about that you're doing now.
I can't hear what she said.
She said, she's asking about since the, are you working on anything new technique wise that you're excited about, either of you right now? Something that's not represented in the exhibition?
What I generally do is I go back to very traditional shapes, traditional pottery making and polishing, because I feel like I have to keep up with tradition to be able to explore and to go to the next level. And right now what I'm doing is I'm looking at how other people, other communities make their pottery and design work. And I started doing a little bit of memories designs on my pots. And I was telling Bruce, when I had worked on this one particular piece, I had deer dancers on there. And I thought to myself, that is so scary. What in the world made those people form a figure that is something else? There's 3 other things involved in one design. And I felt this real sense of fear, and I'm not sure why. But the Membres people were a group of people that were very highly skilled in making their pottery and their design work, and how they incorporated their daily life into their work. And all of a sudden, I just had this sense of their community, and it was somewhat frightening for me. So I found that real interesting, and so I stopped doing the Members pieces because the mere fact that I didn't want to be a part of what was happening within the realm of their lives during that period of time, during the 1200s.
Interesting. Yeah,
You wanna
is
come?
it okay if we go slightly over, or are we, okay, because we have a reception to go. But I would say also, Jody, one of your kind of recent forms is also working out concept pieces. So here's one work that's created for this exhibition, and it's called Buffalo Soldier. And maybe Jody, you might want to say something about this piece.
This is really interesting group of pots that I decided I needed to make. I had seen Obama when he was running for the president for the first time in Espanola. There were crowds and crowds of people. We were waiting in line for hours just to see this man. We finally managed to get around all of this people. We stood in front of him. There were all of this German females that were traveling that decided to come see him. They were going to California, and Spaniards from Spain. And they were all standing there talking. And when he came on the platform, on the stage, he started talking. And they all started saying, marry me, marry me. This particular person who considers herself somewhat traditional, somewhat person that doesn't want to be seen or does not want to have any accolades, maybe, is there screaming, marry me. So I decided at that point, and I'm not sure how much we heard what he was saying, but we were so impressed with just who he was and what he was doing right at the moment. I followed his career for all during the period of time that he was in office. And it took me, what, take 10 years to just finally put something together. But what was I going to do? I started reading about the Buffalo soldiers that were coming into the Southwest right after the Civil War. And the reason why they were called Buffalo soldiers were because of their hair. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to make Obama into a Buffalo soldier who went into the Southwest and into the world and was changing. And I don't think that most people acknowledge what the Buffalo soldiers did in the West. And they were very important group of people that came in to settle the Indian Wars. And so I decided to make him into a Buffalo soldier. And I decided the first tile was going to be with the X's where they were marking their names with an X because they didn't know how to write their names. And the next one, I had the tiles with the X and the buffaloes. And the next one is where Obama is selecting his buffalo with an X. And it was really interesting where there was a little, probably a horse manure that fell in the corner. And I really liked it design-wise, so I worked around that area. But now he selected his buffalo, and he's on his way to the White House. And on that fourth piece, I have the name of all the Black slaves that had helped build the White House and the Capitol building. And some of them, I have numbers on them so that you have 3 Thomases, 5 Toms. But after they worked on the White House and the Capitol and some of the other buildings, they were taken back to their owners and they remained slaves. And so I found that to be just absolutely heartbreaking. And I needed to feel like I had to acknowledge them in some way so that their names are there, so that they're not forgotten. And with the last piece, I fired the tile and I made about 6 of those tiles just to ensure the fact that at least one came out. Once I fired the piece, I decided I needed to get a hammer and I started chipping away at it. And this is where he's riding into the White House and he's breaking the glass ceiling. And then you have the White House on the end. And I had made about 3 large pieces and that was basically one of the only ones that came out. And the red and black small pieces represent the Republicans and the Democrats.
All right. Is there any more pressing question, or we can take them out in the reception, just out here, and we can have a little bit more conversation. And thank you all for coming, and thank you for being here.
I did. I'll invite people to come upstairs to do it.
So please remember, there's a catalog for sale in the gift shop. And it's a beautiful catalog because there's not too many words from me, but there's lots of words from her family and other individuals. So please, you'll want to see that. And I think Jody would probably sign it for you, although I haven't asked her to. And then she's also going to go into the gallery, so spend a few minutes there. And please remember, you're all now part of Jody's story. Thank you for spending the afternoon with us.